Art Hampton, and where we bring you news that the mainstream propaganda doesn't talk about. Today, I have with me David Giordano. He is the Northeastern Executive Director of the John Birch Society, and he lives in New Jersey. You'll probably tell that by his accent. And we're going to be talking about what is your backup plan if Trump doesn't get in the White House. So tell us a little bit about that, Dave.
Well, I came up with this presentation in my head in August, and there was a big tea party up here, and been trying to get in front of them for about a year. And friend got them to give me a call. And he said, what do you want to talk about?" I said, "I have a few things." I said, "But I got a new one. In fact, I haven't even written a presentation yet." And I said exactly what you said. And now you got to remember, this Tea Party, they're all about getting Trump in office. They said, "We don't even want to talk to you about other things until after the election." So I said, "How do I get in front of them while getting our important message in front of them?" And I said, "My presentation is, as you said, what's your backup plan if Trump does not get in the White House?" Well, that intrigued them, and that intrigued a lot of people to come to the presentation. And I said, "It's a very real question." I said, you really confident with the ballot box? Because I'm not. I mean, there's a lot of people that work really hard. They went door to door. They're cleaning the voter list. I actually had dinner with Dr. Douglas Frank at the end of June, and he had stated that you can clear the ballots, the voter roll, but the next day they can put it right back.
It's kind of like cleaning my kid's room. If I don't get control of my kids, I can clean their room all I want, but the minute they go back in there, it's
right.
trashed again. Yeah, you gotta get control of it.
That's good. So the point is anything could happen right now. He could win as he did in 2020, but not end up in the White House, and that's why I purposely called the presentation "If he doesn't get in the White House." So anyway, I'm sorry, this just got off track. So anyway, I said to him, if he doesn't get in the White House because of the ballot box, I said, or they're still going after him, to throw him in jail. I said that could happen. I said, or even what was once a theory that they would assassinate him is no longer a theory. And so I said, so what do? Do you just give up? Say, "Oh, he didn't get in, it's over"? Because I've heard people say that before. Or if he does get in, do you say, "Well, he's in, we did our job," and everybody starts, going back to their locally programmed schedule, life? So he was intrigued. He said, "Okay." So I went to this group in front of a big group of people. And first of all, I started out explaining who Robert Welsh was. And for those on the podcast the first time that never heard of the John Birch Society, Robert Welsh was the founder. John Birch was not the founder. And he was a candy manufacturer and a genius, literally a genius. He went to college at 12 years old, graduated at 16. And he said there is a conspiracy, not a theory, a conspiracy. And I just gave this presentation last night in front of a group, and I told them that it's important to say that there is a conspiracy, because he was told, "Don't say that, you scare people away." He said, "No, you must call it a conspiracy, otherwise you can't beat the conspiracy. You have to expose the conspiracy, because the first job of a conspiracy is to convince you there's no conspiracy."
Well,
so once you shed the light and truth on it, it falls apart. So, but then he said that the job of the insiders, as he called them, a lot of us now call them the deep state. He called them the insiders. He said their goal is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is outstanding, but far from the only example, while the communists are simultaneously and equally getting complete working control of such organizations. We're seeing that today because the communists, China, are in control of the United Nations. And what their goal is, some people say, "Well, you really think that the United Nations is going to control the world?" And Yes, I do. And one indication is that there was a paper out in 1962 called "The World Effectively Controlled by the United Nations," and it is an official government document. It was written by Lincoln Bloomfield, State Department in 1962, and he's a member of the Globalist Organization account, the Council of Foreign Relations. And that document, we're not going to read through the whole thing, but that document, you should get your hands on it, read it. Says that a world summary of a world effectively controlled by the United Nations is one in which world government would come about through the establishment of supernatural organizations characterized by mandatory universal membership and the ability to employ physical force. How are they going to employ that physical force? Well, there's a picture on the front, or a statue on the front of the United Nations building with a twisted gun. First thing they're going to do is disarm us. And how would they do that? Well, there is another document called the Freedom from War, and that's document number U.S. State Department 7227. 7277. And that is a three-step program to disarm the United States. It was delivered to the United Nations by President Kennedy. And as far as I know, it is still an official program of the United States. So, as Robert Welch said, that the United Nations, he said that there are various organizations, various international organizations in which the United Nations is outstanding, but only one example. What are those organizations? See, to form a world government, the United Nations needs to control things. So they need to control all finance, all banking, and that would be through the International Monetary Fund, which is already in place, and they work closely with the Federal Reserve. They need to control all human activity, land usage, and things. They unveiled that in 1992 at the Earth Summit. That was called Agenda 21, now called Agenda 2030. They need to control all weapons, firearms. So that would be the United Nations Arms Treaty, which the United States is not an official part of yet. They need to control all commerce and trade. The World Trade Organization came about during the Clinton administration, courtesy of Bill Clinton and our conservative Republican Newt Gingrich, who helped get that through. Also a member of the both of them members of the Globalist Council of Foreign Relations. They need to control the military. They need a world army, and that is through NATO. NATO is a violation of the Constitution. We'll get into that later. They need to control the legal system, the court system, and they would do that through the ICC, and that is the International Criminal Court. Now, that was signed in 1998, the Rome Statute. The United States did not sign it, one of the few that didn't. But they'll be pushing that too. And as I told this group, what happened to Trump a couple months ago, the sham of a trial, imagine on an international court, be a real kangaroo court. And you or I could be on that court. Then they want to control all education, cultural science. So that's the UNESCO, United Nations Education.
UNESCO.
Yeah. And that really, Bill Gates went and formed an agreement with the United Nations. I think it was back in 2002. And then in 2013 came across Common Core. And, they may have changed the name to try to fool the people, but we have a school system. We don't have a public school system. Not that we need a public school system. We have the government indoctrination centers.
Well, why is it that conservatives that will fight tooth and nail against universal health care, universal this, universal that, and call that out for communism, but then turn around and go, oh, we need universal education? It's strange. It's an inconsistency, really.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point, and it's a good question to ask to make them think. Whenever you're speaking with someone who's not quite getting it, you ask a question like you did. You don't try to beat them over the head, and you make them think. So that's a very very good question. But so they do control the school system. Is our senior editor of the New American Magazine, Alex Newman, has spoken from many groups and asked the question: is our school system broken? And many people say yes, and he says no, it's not.
No, it's
It's
not.
doing exactly what it was designed to do. But not to get too deep into these because we can go do a whole presentation on each. But so they have their world government through these things, and they started something new. Another group, the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, started the Food Action Alliance. Now, if they started UNESCO to control all education in the school system, they started the World Trade Organization to control all trade, and so on and so on. Why would they start the Food Action Alliance? That would be to control all food.
Yeah.
So this document that I said, a world effectively controlled by the United Nations and all these organizations that Robert Welch warned us about in 1958 is happening. But let's go back to some basics, because people really don't realize how bad the United Nations is. And if you compare that to our government, you start with the Declaration of Independence. It says men are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And that really sets the stage to our government. The very first sentence of the Declaration of Independence: there is a creator, and our rights come from the creator. And the purpose of government is to protect those rights, not to provide health care, not to provide education, not to provide all the things that they claim. It's to secure the rights. That's the whole purpose of government.
Yeah.
And then, you go to the Bill of Rights, and it says that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively for the people. And we're gonna tie back to all of this. So that your rights come from God, and the purpose of government is to secure those rights. Now let's compare that to what the UN says. The UN says in the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights that everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by the law. This is a godless organization. There's no recognition of God. Your rights don't come from God. Your rights come from government, United Nations. And it's, you have the right until they decide you don't have it. Now, the UN's International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights says the rights may be subject to certain restrictions, but these shall only be such as are prohibited by law and are necessary. Compare that to man is endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable. They're unalienable. And go through the Bill of Rights. Congress shall not. Congress shall not. Our country grew tremendously not because of what the government did. Our country grew into a powerhouse in a few short decades because of what government was not allowed to do.
Absolutely.
So you compare the UN Charter to, the Soviet Union Constitution, and it has more in common with that.
Wow.
It's the U.S. Constitution. But what we're dealing with is really an evil conspiracy. And again, we can go down that rabbit hole in a hole for hours. But just to summarize, go back as far as 1776 when our country was declaring their independence across the ocean. Then they were having the French Revolution, and the Illuminati emerged from Adam Weishaupt. And there was just carnage there and an evil that was a threat even to the United States from there. And in fact, there's a book called Proofs of Conspiracy by John Robeson, and it was given to George Washington. George Washington said that he didn't have any doubt that this conspiracy may be in the United States. He wasn't sure, but he didn't rule it out.
So they were conspiring back then.
What's that?
So they were conspiring back then.
Yeah. Then and it was so then Then that was picked up, around 1800. Giuseppe Mazzini in Italy continued with the Illuminati, uh, the form that form of evil, and then we get to the 1850s, and Karl Marx came in and introduced this as socialism and communism, all just godless societies and godless philosophies. Until we get to about 1913, in the United States, a man called Edward Mandell House. Now, Edward Mandell House, if there was ever a guy running a presidency from behind the scenes besides the one now, which is pretty obvious, it was Edward Mandell House with Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson said he's my alter ego. He's the first person I see when I get up, the last person I see when I go to sleep. And but he wrote a book called Philip Drew Administrator, and in that book he talked about world government as described by Karl Marx. So he was a Marxist, and it was a fictional book. Then he called this world government the League of Nations. And coincidentally, I guess, or not so coincidentally, he and Woodrow Wilson attempted to start the League of Nations, and he also helped implement the couple of planks of the Communist Manifesto, such as the income tax and the Federal Reserve. So what happened was, we still were, I guess, pretty fresh as compared to today from signing that Constitution. We did have more constitutionalists in office, and they said, no, we're not going to get involved in this League of Nations. So now he had a problem. So he started an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations. And that organization was to bring people in, kind of like a recruiting ground, to bring us to world government. And then he later helped with others to form the United Nations. And that was to be the beginnings of a world government. Now, when you look at people in the Council on Foreign Relations, I usually start off my presentation by telling people, and I did it last night, and I did it in front of that tea party about a month ago. I start out by saying, I like to start out this way to shock the crowd. Because you got to remember, you're in front of a bunch of Trump supporters, and I tell them, I am not a conservative, and I am not a Republican. And the first thing they're thinking, what's this guy doing here? I say I'm a constitutionalist. And then they scratch in their head. What's that mean? So let me give you an example. I said in like 2008, 2012, there were a lot of people on the debate stage, and a Democrat or liberal would say, we need to give more money to the United Nations. A conservative would say, we need to give less. And then you had a constitutionalist, Ron Paul, said, we need to get out of the United Nations. That wasn't allowed. They didn't want to hear that. So maybe that's a little hint, but we have. This is not a Democrat versus Republican thing. I tell them, I hope by the time I'm done speaking, you'll see that. This is not a liberal versus conservative thing. This is a global conspiracy, versus nationalism thing. And if you take two people on the Council on Foreign Relations, the Council on Foreign Relations tells our politicians what they should be doing. We have the left wing, I guess, if you have the traditional sense, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, speaking in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, and she says she's visiting the new office in Washington and says, it's wonderful to be here. This means now I have an office right down the road. This means I don't have to go as far to be told what I should be doing.
So she's telling them this. This is not like conspiracy theory. This is, I mean, is it even a conspiracy at this point if she's just openly saying what's going on? Because a conspiracy requires secrecy.
That's right. Two or more people in secret planning to do something evil. So now they're out in the open. Which brings up what Robert Welch said. Robert Welch said, in the end, they will come out from undercover. But that's when they'll be most vulnerable. And it was in 2002, even though I've been a member working tirelessly behind the scenes as a volunteer, in 2020, I had a good career, and I was offered a position. And I said, I need to use all this that I've learned over 30 years. and commit to it, because in 2020, I immediately recognized that they've come out from undercover.
Yep.
But that's when they'll be most vulnerable. So how will they be most vulnerable? If I go out and educate enough people, and you go out and educate enough people, and our members go out and educate enough people, then they'll be vulnerable. So we have Hillary Clinton saying that, and then I usually follow that up with a video of David Rockefeller congratulating Dick Cheney on stage and thanking him for introducing the FTAA. And I tell the crowd that now, if you're the average person and you saw that, you're thinking, look at that little old man congratulating the second most powerful man in the world. He is one step away from the presidency of the United States, the greatest, most powerful country on the planet Earth. However, if you're a member of the John Birch Society, you're not looking at that one. You're looking at it as, look at the guy in charge in the audience, telling the guy on stage, hey, thanks for doing what I told you to do, putting you there. I told you to push this FTAA, you did it.
Yeah.
And then it goes on, the video goes on where Dick Cheney says, it's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations, and been a member for a long time, a director once. Never mentioned that when I was campaigning back in Wyoming.
Go figure.
So he joined that organization that Edward Mandel House, the Marxists, started. And he's on the same team as Hillary Clinton.
Well, maybe they need to go hunting together.
Yeah, right. But the fix was in with the United Nations from the beginning. It's not some people, Alan Dershowitz, who comes across as a conservative now, is always a liberal. Someone sent me a video where he was saying, we got to get out of the United Nations and all. And I said to the person who sent me the email, I go, well, his message is good. I said, but why did it take him 60 years to figure it out? They said the fix was in from the very beginning.
Yeah.
At the opening of the creation of the United Nations in 1945 in San Francisco. On one side of the table, we had Andrei Brzezinski, the Russian, and on the other side of the table, on our side, we had Alger Hiss, who was later convicted for being a communist, or denying that he was a communist, contempt. So the fix was in from the very beginning, and unfortunately, our Congress only debated it in a mere 6 days, as opposed to the League of Nations, where I think they debated it for 6 months, maybe 8 months or something. I forget what the exact time, but it was months they debated it. It took them 6 days, and they passed it, unfortunately. So you have to understand the conspiracy, and this was designed. But let's get back to Trump and him getting in office. And in 2000, first of all, in 2020, I had a lot of people say to me, we got to wait another 4. Oh my God, he lost. We got to wait another 4 years. And my response was, another 4 years? You start today.
Yeah.
Immediately. Today. You've got a House of Representatives. You've got, and you know what? Before I get into that, I want to say something else about Trump. In 2016, I was not a fan.
Neither was I.
All. Yeah, at all. But the one thing that got my attention, and I usually get a chuckle out of this from the audience, is they called him a racist and anti-Semitic. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. And the reason why is they called the John Birch Society racist and anti-Semitic, even though on our founding executive council was a Jewish man. I forget his name now. For quite a lot of time, we had black speakers on it. So they called them racist. But that's right out of the communist playbook. The communists said, call them racist, call them anti-Semitic, and paint them with a bad smell.
Yep.
So when you're really over the target, they don't argue with you about the issues like they may with some of the other Republicans. They go right after you with the racist and anti-Semitic line. So when they went after him, I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. And the first day he pulled us out of the TPP. He didn't talk about it. He pulled us out.
Yep.
Now, if you understand what's going on, in order to form a world government, you can't get all the countries in the world to join. So you have to form regional governments first, and they do that through trade agreements. when I was younger, if you had told me in 1995 or whatever that Italy, France, Spain, Greece, Portugal, and Germany and England would just hand over their sovereignty, I would say you're nuts. That's not going to happen. But it took them 50 years through trade agreements for them to hand over their sovereignty, form a regional government. We already have an African Union, which formed in 2002. They're working on the Eurasian Union or the Middle Eastern Union and those. And they're working on the North American Union. So you get like 7 unions to join the world government. So that's what makes the TPP dangerous. So he pulled us out of that. He pulled us out of the arms treaty, the UN arms treaty. He pulled us out of the climate accord, Paris Treaty, the UN Paris Treaty. He defunded UNESCO. He stuck it to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And I'm watching this, and I'm going, this is huge. Why? Because I'm not involved in Republican, Democrat, or conservative, liberal. I study the New World Order like the members of the John Birch Society do. And I realize that this is a huge threat to the globalists. Now, he did do some things wrong. He did a few things, and they weren't minor. He signed the USMCA, the United States-Mexico Canada Trade Agreement, which puts us closer to a North American Union. And when he did that, well, if he realized that, he said the TPP was a terrible agreement, which it was, and it was written by Robert Lighthizer, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, Robert Lighthizer, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, also wrote the USMCA.
It sounds like they keep the communists. They get some kickback from something, and then they just repackage it as something else, and then push it through. Kind of like you mentioned Common Core, and they changed the name of it, and then repackaged it and pushed it through, and then people, the normal, everyday, common layman goes, "Oh well, we fought the battle, we won, we stopped this. Now it's time to go back to sitting on the couch and eating potato chips and watching football." And then all of a sudden they change it and then push it through anyway under a different name. They do the same thing with critical race theory. Now it's DEI or social emotional learning. It's all one and the same. It's just repackaged the same garbage. And conservatives or your average person, they oppose it, and then they go back to sleep. And then when people go back to sleep, then they just push it through. And it has even less opposition than the original thing did, it seems like. Just by changing the name of it. But if the shoe fits, it fits.
You're right. And Robert Welsh warned us about that in the transcripts of his 2-day meeting at the founding. If you look in the Blue Book, he says the communists work through a gradualism, and they never take their eye off the ball. So just as you described, when it gets exposed, they kind of, pull back and then reorganize and rename it, and then slowly bring it forward. And like you said, sometimes even stronger than the original time. Absolutely.
Well, we'll have to continue this conversation in part 2 of this. This seems like a good place to stop. Come back next time for part 2 of what is your backup plan if Trump doesn't get in the White House. Thank you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.